what's up everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick axslav ranish, as we explore strategies and tactics used in the game of Starcraft 2. So today we got a special match coming up for you guys. It's going to be analyzing the Ret versus Feast series playing on Friday. We're going to go over Game 1, then Game 2, then Game 3, then Game 4, and then of course at the end it's going to be the Q&A session. So tweet at me any questions you guys have at axslav. I answer those at the end of the show. There could be questions about the contents of today's show. There could be yesterday's or Friday's show, Thursday's show, future shows. Any general questions about general strategy, whatever you want to ask, go ahead, tweet to me at axslav. It'll be answered at the end of the show. But now let's jump into Ret versus Feast Game 1 on Daybreak. A couple important things they're going to talk about are, one, what makes an elegant defense versus just normal defense, how to defend against Mutalisk, and then also using mobility to divide and conquer. So we'll start off at this game number 1 at the 9-minute mark and talk about basically the elegant defense a Zerg player can use, right? So what you can do is basically as soon as you see that your opponent got a 3rd and 4th gas as a Zerg player, feel free to drone all the way up to 65 or 66 without worrying about anything, as long as you're mining those gases. And then the thing is yes, droning this high may mean your defenses are going to be tight, right? It's going to be very tricky to hold these type of attacks. But especially as long as you know they build a tech building, like you already scout the robotics, you should be able to defend. And if you can barely defend, that means it was an elegant defense. It was just perfect. Everything was done just right. And you're the strongest economy going forward coming out of that defense. So you notice, of course, Ret has a couple units in his main because he's anticipating maybe a War Prism here, force fielding out his guys from his main, but then he sees on the minimap the units coming forward. Also notice, he built all these roaches at his 3rd hatchery because he knew there's 2 possible threats with the robo, right? This early on, right? A couple minutes from now, there could be an immortal timing, but at this early in the game, the only threats he has to watch out for are the War Prism drop in the main with Sentry to force field him, and then of course force field here and the trapping any other units on the low ground, killing his main. So he's got to have his idle units in the main. The other threat, right, as long as he has enough to make sure sentries can't be dropped, he's fine, is just a direct attack with basic gateway units. That's why his extra roaches, he's building 5 more. All these roaches are being built at this 3rd hatchery right here, getting ready to defend, attack, and look at the rally point. It's set up here to look for potential proxy pylons. So very, very, very elegant defense. Just the bare minimum needed to defend any type of attack that's coming at him. Now, of course, this type of attack, he could have defended with a few less roaches, right? He doesn't need these guys. But he got those guys because he wanted to make sure a drop in the main, he could stop that and not take too much damage. Now just going here, it looks like, oh, maybe in a little trouble. Maybe some forest fields, his hatchery could come under fire. But no, he's fine. Just the right amount of roaches to get out without too much of a problem. So as we go forward in this game, the next thing we're going to take a look at is basically how to defend against Mutalisk play. So we have here Ret's going to put on a little bit of pressure here. Just up the front. Feast will take his 3rd base without too much of a problem. He's got sentries and force fields. Ret deflects a drop heading towards main. And the game will progress normally until Ret's getting Mutalisk. Now, of course, Feast, using the hallucination, is able to scout the Spire. Of course, he's going to know Mutalisk are on the way. So to defend against Mutalisk, if you know your opponent's going for a multiple attack, right? If they're attacking one direction, there's Mutalisk coming, they're probably going to come up the top. You have your Phoenix on them. But you also know that there's probably going to be units out here as well, right? You see this army coming here. The best way to defeat this type of multi-pronged attack is get barely enough to deflect one of the attacks, right? So right here is just to say, okay, the bare minimum to deflect this attack right here in the main is just a few stalkers. I cannot trap Mutalisk to just get the minimum to deflect this. And then what I can do is he's going to mass out here and get ready to attack when I move out. Instead of waiting for him to mass up and get ready, I'm going to move out and get the drop on him. Because if I get a drop on him, I can get a whole bunch of free kills. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't get that many free kills. But the idea was if Ret was a little bit busy microing these Mutalisks around versus the stalkers, and he had just like 1 or 2 seconds of a slower reaction to this army here, he could have force field trapped all these roaches and gotten a ton of free kills. So if you ever know your opponent's going for a split attack, always try to just parry one attack, and if you have a decent army that you know you can handle them, try to get the drop on your other army, attack them before they can coordinate their multi-pronged attack, And if you can kind of jump them and catch them off guard, you can get a lot of free kills. So that was the idea that Feast went there. Didn't quite work out ideally for him, but it still worked out fine. Now, of course, Rhett's going to come in here. He concentrated his forces because he knows that Feast is worried about the drop in the main, so some of Feast stalkers are still a little bit out of position. And this is where we talk about using Mulus again, right? So what we want to do is, if you concentrate your forces when you know they're weak, right, he has to put the force fields here. And what the force fields do, if we jump into the overlay, right, what these force fields over here do is these roaches cannot attack the gateway army right here. But what they can do is they can just come around right here. Oops, come around right here, and then they can focus down this nexus. And these force fields, they don't only save this army from dying, because this army would die to this combined force. They don't only save it from dying. It was great force fields, by the way. Feast did this perfectly. But they also prevent the Protoss army from coming out here and cutting out the Zerg army. So the Zerg army can come in here, kill this nexus, and then retreat back this way, and these force fields stop the Protoss from cutting off that retreat and getting the kill off the Zerg army in the process. So the force fields can work both ways. So when you're using Mulus as Zerg, if you know your opponent's spread out, you attack in one place to get them concentrated together all in that location, right? And then, of course, at some point, they're going to use that recall, and they're going to come all here to save it, right? Now his whole force is concentrated to defend this one location, so it's kind of the opposite. And as soon as they're concentrated to defend this one location here, that's when you can use your superior, your faster units, can split off and attack, again, the undefended location. So as soon as we can see exactly what happened here, if you look over here, right, he comes in and attacks here and forces the whole army. So the whole army of, let's say where Feast is. Oops, switch color. So Feast had units here, and he had units here. And he had to bring these units down here to join, and now he has a whole big army over guarding his third base, right? But then what happens is Red says, okay, you're going to bring your whole army down to defend. Some of my guys can back up here, and the other guys can get up here, and because they're Mulus, they can cover this distance very, very, very fast, and you won't be able to quite retreat all your stalkers in time. So when you get the units all grouped up, concentrated in one spot, that's when you can attack the main, and they'll have a much harder time retreating from you. So we can jump back in this replay and see exactly how he does that. If we look under Rhett's point of view, he knows his opponent was grouped here to defend, so he backs these out off of here, and then Mulus already swung around, heads straight back into the main. And we can see here, Feast is trying to get his units back, but because they're stalkers and not Mulus, they're just a little bit slower, can't quite make it back to the main in time. So the Mulus can come here, get a lot of probe kills, and army comes in here, and then unfortunately, Feast misses that the warp into block. These units run in, and they're going to just do massive damage. And this is going to pretty much end the game and need Rhett to win. Now, this thing was like taking an opportunity of a mistake Feast made that wouldn't always happen. But even if, he did have this walled off, the units didn't get in, he still, just by using that principle of grouping the units here and then striking into the main right when they group up all in the third, you can get a lot of probe, because we can see here, Rhett's up by 22 workers. He's got four bases already up versus 3, and he's got this fifth base being produced. He's even got good upgrades on the way, and he's got infestation pit ready to start his hive tech. So using those basic principles of how to control Mulus is very important to win a game with Mulus. You split them up at first, and then you attack at one location, get them so they have to group their army to concentrate there, and then you split off the Mulus and go back in your main really quickly. And at Hard to Storm, this works even better because now Mulus move at movement rate 4, which means they're much faster than Stalkers, and even with Blink, it's very hard for a defending Protoss player to keep up with their movements when you're using Mulus. This wraps up game number 1. We'll take a short break and be right back with game number 2.